Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Marjorie. And I didn't ask your last name. How do you say that?
Aunos.
Aunos. Okay, I would have said it wrong. So I'm still looking for the puppy to see if he's down here, but he's not. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So obviously I'm a mom, and that's the first thing. And I'm a mom of a beautiful young man who's going to turn 11 soon. His name is Thomas. I'm also a psychologist by training and a researcher. And my expertise is to work with parents, mom in general, who have an intellectual disability. So that's my my go-to expertise.
Got it. Now, I have a couple of notes from when we talked before, and you became a mom. You were a single mom by choice.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I was getting older. I had just left a really happy relationship, but a relationship that wasn't going to allow me to become a mom. And I felt that my calling was more, to become a mother. So I left that relationship to become a mom. But the problem is that I was still in love with the man I left. And I felt it was very awkward to try to date while you're still in love with somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I decided that if I wanted to become a mom nowadays, we can do that. We don't have to be with a partner. And I felt it was the most sort of honest decision that I could take for myself and for, my future child.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's it. I
went
through the process and everything went well.
Yeah. And now he's 11.
11, yes.
And he has a mind of his own, I'm sure.
Yes. Like every other kid.
Right. They start doing that, don't they?
Yes. And 11 is like on the verge of, teenage years.
Right.
So we could sort of see, the wave coming. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's interesting.
I'm reading a book from another guest who wrote a book for the adolescent years. And I was like, I just know that he has my attitude already. And so I'm going to need help learning how to deal with my own attitude coming back at me.
That is so true.
Right.
So true. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started reading that a couple days ago. So far, so good, And so one of the things about me is that I've been a surrogate 3 times, and I had a baby for a couple, for 2 couples, and a woman who was choosing to be a single mom. And I didn't choose to be a single mom. And so I just remember thinking, why would you choose this? Why would and I never asked her because, That's a personal question, obviously, and it actually started making me think about the judgments that we make about how people become parents. And that was one of the books that I had an idea of writing, is like becoming a parent the right way, using
Right.
air quotes in around right. And was that something that you experienced, people questioning, like, why would you do this? Why wouldn't you wait for the right relationship?
Well, first, I'm going to say thank you for to you
Mm,
for becoming a surrogate, because to me, I really, really wanted to become a mom, and I wouldn't have been able to if
mm,
it hadn't been for somebody else who was generous enough and trusting enough um, to give me the other half that I needed, basically. And so for that, I really I commend you and I thank you. And this is a really beautiful thing that you did for other people.
thank
And I, yeah, I just wanted to sort of say that.
Absolutely.
Um, in terms of like my decision, I was pretty open.
Mm,
Like pretty much everybody knew,
yeah.
and they knew like when I started thinking about it. So, before I became pregnant, I think it took me with the whole process about 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
So people had heard me for over 2 years talking about this. And everyone who knew me knew how much I loved the man I left.
Mm,
They saw like the the weight that I lost. They saw like how it was a really bad time, because I felt like I was sort of stuck in between sort of a love for someone and a future love for someone who may not, because you never know if you're gonna like become a parent. Sort of, you hope for it, but you don't know if it's gonna happen. And especially like doing it on your own. I mean, you're trying in vitro, by insemination, but every time you don't know if you're going to become a parent. And for me, I mean, it took 8 trials over 10 months, because
wow.
there were 2 months where I couldn't, it wasn't good timing, or like the fertility signs were not good enough
Mm,
to even try. So that's like over a year, and that's just the trial part. Before that, I had so many tests done to make sure that I was healthy enough. Then I found out that I had precancerous cells, and I had
mm,
to treat that. So that was like more delays. So throughout that, people sort of heard me sort of talk openly. And, I said that I wanted to make it a very honest decision. And
mhm,
so for me, it was, if I was comfortable talking about it, it was going to be better for my child to be, because I didn't want my child to feel ashamed that they didn't have a father.
right.
I didn't want me to lie or to pretend like there was maybe somewhere there, or whatnot. So again, still in the honesty part, it was sort of like, well, I better feel comfortable with that, because I need my son, or like my child, to be comfortable with it,
Yeah.
and not feel the judgment, and not feel sort of like, um, the stigma, or whatever. And so I felt I needed to just stand there and say to everybody, hey, at the end of the day, I really don't care what you think.
Right.
I, I, there are reasons, there are personal reasons for me to make that choice. And I felt it was the best choice for me. On top of that, I had from the get go the support of my parents
Mm,
and my family and my really close friends. And so the stigma was sort of like, like everybody who I care about are sort of like behind me
yeah.
and happy about this. And so that was that. And the person for me that was the most difficult in terms of telling or disclosing sort of that dream was my dad, because my dad um, had been raised without a father, without ever knowing who his father was. And so for me, it was important to talk to him about it, so that he felt also comfortable with my decision, but maybe also in terms of the role that he would take with my child. And, we had a long conversation, because, you know, I mean, he didn't know his father because it was the war, Second World War in France. So it was sort of like a different context versus me. It was sort of like I was initiating it. I was okay with it versus his mom was sort of ashamed. That's why she never spoke of it. And when he sort of said, if you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. And I'm going to love your child just like my grandfather loved me, and is going to do that. And so I was, perfectly fine in terms of the decision that I made, basically.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. And I commend you for just saying, this is what I want and this is who I believe I'm meant to be, and I'm going to pursue it, and regardless, and really being open about it, and thinking about, how it'll affect your son if you're ashamed, and maybe your dad's past had factored into that too. But yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah.
Actually, like my dad's past, what it did is that I found out that there was 2 types of donor banks, and one that is called an open donor bank. And basically, these are men who said they would be okay meeting or getting in contact with the child when the child turned 18. And so I knew that my dad had struggled at certain periods of his life, not knowing anything, right? Because my grandmother was just not talking about this.
Yeah.
And so that was like my one condition. If I'm doing this, and I had said that. Yes. So for my dad, it was, it was always a wonder who his dad was. And so for me, it was very important that we look at an open donor bank so that my child, if they wanted, would get sort of that information and be able to find out who the other half is. Basically.
Yeah. I didn't really know that was an option. I can't say that I've looked into it much at all on a personal level. And, I started as a surrogate. I'm not going to lie and say it wasn't money driven, but I found it because I was looking for a part-time job. And I found it ad on Craigslist, but it was something that I wanted to do even when I was a teenager. I just didn't know that it had a name. But a girlfriend of mine said that she wanted to have a baby, but she didn't want to have the baby. Like, she wanted to be a mom, but she didn't want to birth the child. And I was like, well, I want to experience pregnancy, but I don't want to be a mom. And so I was like, I'll have a baby for you, and but then it took a year and a half. Once I decided I did want to be a mom, it took a year and a half for me to get pregnant with his dad. And so I'm not a patient person. And the stories that I've heard that moms have gone through and parents have gone through to become parents. Even one of my friends is currently pregnant through her surrogate. And I believe it's a 10-year-long journey minimum. Wow. And yeah. And so I think about my year and a half as like a drop in the bucket in comparison. And, so I knew that I didn't want any more, and that, I come from a family that my grandma had 7 children, and the last pregnancy was twins. Like, oh Lord. No, thank you. And so I'm waiting to be matched to do it again. So it's less of the money motivation at this point and more like, I just miss being pregnant.
Oh, wow.
It's a
fantastic. Because there's a lot of women that don't like to be pregnant. Yeah. I personally did not enjoy it at all. I felt it restricted my movements. I felt I was heavy. Oh my God, it was like so, difficult to carry. I couldn't do like the things that I wanted to do the same way. Yeah. I loved my kid.
Right.
And as soon as he came out, but it was very difficult to sort of, it's a big adaptation. So, I mean, if you like being pregnant and you want to help people, And that's a beautiful thing to do. It's a beautiful gift, actually.
Thank you. Yeah, I was the worst part was labor for me. And my son's labor lasted 3 hours total, and the rest of them were less. And so it's like, it's a minuscule price to pay for, helping somebody else's family grow.
Yeah.
So you said you work with moms who have mental disabilities. Is that correct?
Yeah. Intellectual. So
Intellect.
cognitive limitations. So sometimes we're learning disabilities in a way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what drew you to that?
Oh, well, that's an interesting story, actually. I think I was about 19, 20, and I was working at a camp one summer, and my role was to be what they call a shadow. So I was there to support a young girl who was about 8 years old who had an intellectual disability. And it was basically to include her in the camp and in her group with the other children and so forth. So that's what I did. And within like a few days, someone said to me, "You should meet her mom. It would tell you a lot about, how you could support her." So I thought it was an interesting, sort of comment. But that's what I did. I went to meet her mom, and that's when I realized that mom also had an intellectual disabilities. And when I saw her, like when I talk about her, I call her Julie. So when I saw Julie, like she was such an amazing mom, trying to do everything perfectly, which I thought was both amazing and sort of like I wondered, why do you need to be so perfect, right? I later found out that because she has an intellectual disabilities, there was a lot of stigma and discrimination, and so she had to look more perfect than even the perfect like the most perfect mom ever, because her children were at risk of being removed at any point. But I thought she was amazing. She was really focused on her children, putting their sort of needs before hers and just trying to do best by them. And when I spent, that evening with her and her children, it was it. I knew this was going to be my career, that it was just perfect. I had been working with people with intellectual disabilities for years prior to that. And so it was sort of, okay, I'm working in intellectual disabilities, and I'm working in, with parents, and I'm working with children. And I love like having a job that's just diversified. And so I felt like I could be working with pretty much anybody. And I love that. It was just, that was it.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love stories like that moment that you just know.
Yeah. The interesting part also in my story is that 15 years into my career, so I've been working in this field for 25 years. So about 10 years ago, I had a car accident, and my son Thomas was 16 months old. And all of a sudden, because I sustained a spinal cord injury in the accident, I became a mom with a disability. Not an intellectual disability, but a physical disability. And when we look in research and even in clinical practice, we see that parents with intellectual disabilities or physical disabilities are at higher risk of discrimination, stigma that leads to child removal or loss of custody. So for me, it was sort of like, whoa, I get hit sort of a second time, but this time around it's sort of having to focus on like my own parenting and how will I present my parenting to the world, being in a wheelchair, a single parent, and how am I going to handle that part? And so that was another challenge life threw me.
Did that change things for you? Did that change like how you approached your practice? I'm sure it changed a lot of things, but like specifically, did it change the way you approach your practice?
Yeah. It's actually interesting because my practice was, changed twice. So the first time when I gave birth, so when I became a mom, and my son was 2 months old, and I had said to my staff who were still working, I was on mat leave, said to my staff, come, I'll still supervise you if you want. And so they came during, Thomas's nap time, and I said, scratch everything we've been doing up until now. Because, it's like we come in and we say, we're the expert in parenting, and I'm going to show you how it's done. For real, we weren't doing that, but we were sort of, implying that in a way, because, we came in as professionals. And I said, oh my God, we don't know anything until we're parents. Like, seriously, parenting happens, when it happens. Like, it's, live, and you're live all the time. And on top of that, I would even say that it's not because you've parented one person that you're like, not going to be surprised with the second or the third one, because parenting is also very individual to the child, because it's your interaction with that child. And so that was the first time that my practice basically went, okay, let's recap a little bit and let's reanalyze what we've been doing and why and how it's been working. And then the second time, obviously, when I became a parent with a disability, where this time around, it wasn't so much that my practice was skewed or anything. I wasn't, I had become a little bit more mellow also with the experience in terms of giving advice. I wasn't giving advice, it was more working with. But the emotional experience, I now know differently because I've been there. For example, I know that there's, like I said, discrimination in terms of even sort of the fear of child welfare coming into play and removing children. And I felt that, I was in the hospital, I was trying to figure out what that meant in terms of a spinal cord injury, how life was going to turn out. And I got scared. I got scared that someone was going to come, or that my, nurses or the doctors or somebody in the hospital would flag me as a potential risk for my son. And I knew how my clients had to struggle with that and had to fight for their rights to be recognized. And I feared that I would be put in the same position. And so I think it's, my practice changed in that respect, but more in terms of understanding the emotional turmoil and the, how the gaze of everyone can really impact your parenting or your fear around sort of your parenting.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that you said that it really changed when you became a mom. Like, before, you were practicing a lot more from theory.
That's
and
right.
From probably what the experts say is the right thing to do or whatnot. And then it's like, oh, I have experience now. And I know there's a meme somewhere that says something along the lines of, the best parents in the world have no children.
Yes. I saw that one. Yeah, recently.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because with my supervisor who supervised my thesis, we had co-written a book on parenting, but on parenting assessments, actually. And, in those we had sort of grids. So how, if you're a professional, how can you assess parenting within parenting capacity assessments? And I remember thinking, and it was like the changing the diaper grid that created me the most issue. So, it said you need to be super clean, you need to wash your hands, you need to be close to water, to be able to get the place very cleaned up and no germs. But my condo didn't give me that. space. So I wasn't able to have like the diaper changing station near the the sink. And so it was sort of like, oh, well, I'm not following the grid. And I was like, but I can't. It's not that I don't want to. I actually do want to, but it's just not set up that way. So it was sort of like, how can we judge parents when, if you don't consider sort of like all the other factors in terms of, like the environment. It's not, parenting is not done alone. Parenting is not done, independently from the context, from the situation, from, anything that can happen basically. So it was interesting for me.
Yeah, I just love when I see a little person run in the back across the camera. I'm going to run back again.
It's funny because I noticed.
Because what?
I noticed.
Yeah.
And I wasn't
it just wipes everything out of my mind because like I still have the programming of it's supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be professional. It's supposed to be all of these things that COVID really made go away.
Yes.
But you were telling me about the mom who, the first mom, Julie, I think you named her, that she wanted to be perfect. And I resonated with that so much just because I think at some level, every mom wants that. We don't want to be judged probably the way that we judged parents before we became one.
Yes.
But I had incidences with my son just having the meltdown at the park and not wanting to leave and just strapping him in and like trying to force him in there and get the buckle, and he's squirming and inside once I buckle it, I'm kind of like, haha, you're trapped.
Yes.
No, you can't escape now.
Yeah.
But just feeling like everyone's eyes are on me and thinking that I'm this crazy woman that's abusing my child who's not supposed to be making noise while downstairs.
Yeah. It's really difficult actually because we do that, right?
Right.
And I think that we are all aware of
joining us for another review. He usually comes in at the end to say something, but
oh, well, do you want to say something now?
Would you like to say something? E, yeah. He gets a little bit shy in front of the camera, I think.
But at the same time, he must like it a little bit.
He does like it. He really wants to not be shy in front of the camera. He told me the other day, I really want to go live on Facebook. And I was like, well, we can totally make that happen.
Of course.
In fact, I like that idea much better. And as we're recording this, we're still in July. This episode's probably coming out around February of 2022.
The top word of February will be E.
All right.
Sounds good.
So I'm planning on revamping my mom group that is now guilt-centric, but to center it more on just all things mom and life related, not just mom related, but like things that, like the thing that kind of popped in my head the other day was that we're still trying to figure out like how to human, and then someone hands us a baby and expects us to teach the baby how to human, and we haven't figured it out yet. And so so my plan is to change the name of the group to Peaceful Patient Mamas Club, and then have a evening, a weekly happy hour where we go on and have a personal development lesson and questions and whatever. So my human comment sparked an idea. So go ahead while I mute the chaos.
No, it's just actually the idea slipped my mind, of course. But it's interesting how in society we have those high expectation, and I think that it's more than just, moms on ourselves or moms on other moms. I think it's just society has this picture that a mom is all giving, the needs of the children come first. It's also a mom who's like fast paced, quick pace, who can like react really quickly, who has all the answers. And I could go on. I mean, we all see that picture, and that picture or those standards are sort of ingrained in how we perceived mothering. And I say mothering more than parenting because I do feel, and research does say that actually, that there is a lot more sort of stress or like pressure on mothers, and probably because, like we're the one carrying the babies at first, we're the one feeding if we're breastfeeding, and so there's all those notions that come into play. But those, expectations are way too high when you're an able-bodied person. When you add sort of disability, it creates even more pressure. But ask any mother, irrelevant of disability or not, they will all say, I can't sustain those standards. I can't, right? It's just not possible.
Right.
And so, being self-compassionate, but also show compassion towards other parents. I think it's definitely the way to go in the future. Yeah. Because we all struggle, and there's all like different things, And the thought came back where, we all try to figure out how to live. And, last year when COVID hit, I kept saying to my son who was being homeschooled, to be safe for me, I kept saying to him, like, oh, you need to relax, you need to breathe, you need to like, and he wasn't doing it. And like, it would spark sort of, arguments between each other. And it was sort of like really difficult time, obviously. And I think it's the case for a lot of parents and families. And, it's only when I realize, I'm asking him to like de-stress and breathe and, go meditate. But am I doing it? Not really. So isn't that interesting that all of a sudden, like I'm realizing like, oh, like I'm supposed to be the adult that I want him to become. Because if I'm not, he's not going to become that. He's going to say like, well, no, that's not how it's done. How you act is how it's done. And so it was a very interesting life lesson last year for me.
It's so interesting to me that just about every single episode, there's been some version of what you just said, like that and that's the intro and of my podcast, is that we have to become the adult that we want them to be. And to my knowledge, you haven't heard it.
No.
Yeah, because I haven't been playing it for everybody, but every person has come in their own words, said something along that concept. And it's like, that's the key, that they become like who we model for them.
That's right.
And it's important
Definitely.
for us to understand that the best thing that we can do for our children is to work on ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
So agree, 100%.
Is there a piece of advice that you want to impart on our moms?
I would say just, trust your gut and breathe. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we forget to breathe, and we just need to breathe. Don't sweat the small stuff. Yeah. Just know that your relationship with your child is, what it is, and you can work on it as you work on yourself, and just you know, don't be so hard on yourself, because we all are. And I know it's easier said than done. And I struggle with it, I would say, even on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard, but in the same time, it's sort of like, if you know, if we're mindful of it, I think we're going to catch ourselves. And so it's about becoming aware of that and just doing the best that we can.
I've been listening to meditations lately, and one of the things that they say, well, they're guided meditations, so
Yep.
they actually talk in them.
Yep.
And in the one that I listened to, he says, breathe in. And I noticed that I'll just go, and it'll be like super quick. And I'm like, no, breathe in and wait until he says, breathe out.
Yeah.
Like we breathe so shallowly that it's not giving our body the oxygen that it needs. And no wonder we're stressed. Like just 3 deep breaths can, in a row, like really deep breaths, and then letting them out can actually just reset everything, which I'm sure is what you were wanting your 10-year-old at the time to do.
And you know what? That's what we did, because all of last year, we embarked on this mindfulness meditation, that both of us, so together. And I would say, I'm going into my lesson or my meditation practice, you know, and then he would tell me, oh, it's my turn now because I'm going. And you know what? We are a better family because of it.
I love that. That's really cool. It's definitely something I'm looking into implementing soon, because he's asking me, how do I calm down? And, you know, my first question is, I don't know. Or my first answer is like, I don't know. I don't know how you calm down. I just do that. Like, I just calm down now, you know, it's not, I just calm down. Like I'll have a thought that gives my body a physical reaction. And then I'm like, oh, I have a physical reaction in my body now. I don't want to be in this state. What thought got me there? Now, what thought will get me back? And I mean, I didn't always do that. That was like, this is new within the last 2 years, and probably within the last year. Cause I remember when we were in COVID, that like in the very beginning, when we first shut down and something would happen, I would get triggered, I would react, and then I would apologize for the reaction. And then I would think, okay, what created that? And I de-triggered a lot of things, and I'm nowhere near perfect. That's not the goal or even the reality, but it's much like I'm way different than where I used to be in my reactions.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely, you know, a psychologist who's sort of cognitive behaviorist will tell you that's exactly what we're trying to do, to try to identify the thought that's behind it, to try to de-trigger the reaction. And certainly like being mindful of what goes on, or how like we live and feel our emotions, certainly can help us sort of in identifying, because to identify the thought, you need to first realize that you're having the reaction. And so that's being sort of by being aware of how you feel and how, you know, emotions are lived within you. And that's when you could then, you know, sort of use your strategies. But strategies of mindfulness only are efficacious if you have practiced them, you know, and if you know how to. So that's why we try to do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, and it just takes practice and it takes the willingness to start and then practice it until it eventually it becomes second nature. I was on a coaching call earlier today where I was the client, and she said, okay, XYZ is in your future. And she said, how does that make you feel? And I'm like, well, my first thought is, right? But my second thought is, but that means that this is working.
Right.
And it was like, and that first thought was just, it was like remnants of an old belief.
Yeah.
You know, there's, I'm trying to think of a non-gross analogy. I'm thinking like there's a decaying thing in the grass, you know, and there's going to be remnants of it months after it is actually gone.
Mhm.
But you're going to see there's still pieces there, and that doesn't mean that the dead animal is still in your yard.
Yeah.
But I don't know why that analogy came into my head.
Because of the smell.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, habits take time to form.
Yeah.
So you need to take and give it time.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes hard.
And I know that you've studied psychology and all of the things, and you've probably read 100,000 books, but is there any book in particular that was really impactful for you along your journey?
So many. Oh my God.
I know I
Yeah.
kind of sprung it on.
No, but hold on. I mean, I really loved reading the Brené Brown's books. I think that's a given. A lot of people like her.
Yeah.
There's, you know, if anybody is into self-help, you know, or working on it, and I can't see, I don't know, but Fatima Doman is a life coach, and I'm reading like a second book of hers. The first one, which is called Authentic Resilience, is amazing. I loved it.
Yeah.
I'll throw other names. If you want to talk or read about resilience, Dr. Lucy Hone would be a good, and her book is called Resilience Grieving. So it's a little bit different angle. Anything in terms of like Dr. Ryan Nemick, who is under the VIA Institute, who talks about character strength. Those are more sort of professional books. They're not necessarily, maybe if you're not a professional, but certainly if you are, those would be like good books. There's Emily Esfahani Smith, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering their names, I hope I'm not, who talks, or her book was about, you know, purpose and meaning. And then definitely the book from Dr. Kirsten Neff, who talks about self-compassion. So those are all the books I read in 2020.
Oh, well.
That's all my library. And you know what? They are inside me now. I'm like, seriously, if you have like talent, you could read any of those books and be like really in awe. And if there's one like really short one, would be The Last Lecture, which that was a more personal one. So you could check that out.
And I'm only laughing because I was anticipating you say those are all the books that I've read with a period at the end.
Yes.
And you said in 2020. And I'm like, I don't know that I read books in 2020 at all. I did read No Drama Discipline inside COVID, and I say the word read loosely because I listened to it. But yeah, that was a really good book. I've talked about it a couple times on the podcast. But where can our listeners find you?
So I gave you, I think, links. So I have a Facebook page. I'm on Instagram, Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. Yeah. And usually my handles are something around Ninja Marge. And that was a name that was given to me after my accident by one of my friends, who sort of said, now you're like hardcore ninja. And so I keep it because it's just a good thing to remember.
I love that. And the links will be in the show notes. So you'll be able to find her, Marjorie there. Thank you so much for being a guest on Imperfect Momming today. I really appreciate everything that you had to pour into our listeners, as well as just a new perspective to, even for me, about struggles that moms are going through. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely talking to you. It was great. It was like having a conversation.
Yeah, that's my goal of the podcast. That's what I enjoy, is the conversations.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So we'll have another episode of Imperfect Momming next week. And until then, keep healing. Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AlysiaLyons.com. That's AlysiaLyons.com. See you next time.